What's going on, everybody? Zach Rosenblatt back here with Mike Kaye for the latest episode of the No Huddle Show Quarantine Edition. The Eagles have kept busy over the weekend. They made a few moves. We're gonna highlight those. We're all still stuck at home, so there's not much else to do except for check out free agency. But so the Eagles they signed a guy that we have been talking about on this podcast for the last week or two. Actually, they signed Will Parks, Philly Will, from the University of Arizona, from the Denver Broncos, to a 1-year deal. They signed, what's that linebacker's name? Jatavis Bryant, right? Or Brown.
Brown, yeah.
Jatavis Brown, linebacker from the Chargers. And then the city of Philadelphia mourns the loss of Nelson Aguilar, who signed with the Las Vegas Raiders. I believe that's all the major stuff that happened, right?
Chance Warmack got signed by the Seahawks, okay? They're taking a chance on Warmack.
Yeah, our emergency podcast didn't, something went wrong technically, so we couldn't post it, but
yeah.
we had 45 minutes on Chance Warmack the other day that we recorded.
It was great. I mean, we went back and forth like the way he struggles with blocks. I mean, it was really something.
Before we get into stuff, how you holding up these days?
Well, I mean, I'm working a lot. You know, it's.
I say we're I don't know if blessed is the right word, but we're lucky enough that our job isn't right now isn't really impacted by all of this.
Yeah, you know what's interesting is daycare's open for my kid right now, and I got a lot of crap on Twitter for saying that, but everybody's excited about free agency and everything. Well, who do you think reports all that stuff? Who's doing all, you know what I mean? Who's writing all those stories? So, I need time to think and stuff. My wife also works in healthcare, so she also is, not doctor-wise, but she works at CVS, so she helps with the pharmacy and everything, so she's not off either. So we're just, there's a lot going on there. So, yeah. Yeah,
it's craay out there. We should say order takeout when you can. Help the food industry, because I know it's hurting right now.
Mm-hmm. Tip well, too.
Tip well. Be a good person. It's pretty simple. All right, let's get into some football though. Let's hit the more minor move out first. Let's talk Jatavis. I don't really know that much about him, so you're gonna have to talk about him. I know he was on the Chargers. Didn't really play that much last year, but he had played quite a bit the 2 years before that, right?
Yeah, he's a smaller linebacker, 5'11", 230, 235. Played for Gus Bradley, who typically likes taller linebackers, prefers guys who can move well in space. He's an athletic player. Interesting nugget. He went to the same he was in the same high school class with Crevon LeBlanc. So they both came from Glade Central and Belglade, which is like a football factory. They've put out tons of really great NFL players. It's escaping me who else came from there, but it's a football factory in South Florida, and the two of them became really close buddies. I talked to Crevon the other day. He said that they're very close, and look, he fits into that cohabitation matrix. He's getting the league minimum on a 1-year deal, which is $910,000, I believe, after the renegotiations of the CBA, as my dog sneezes behind me.
Jack always makes a cameo these days.
Bless you, Jack. Bless you. Gesundheit. Yeah, I think it's a flyer. It seems like it just seems kind of like there's this sense of, the Eagles don't really care about their linebacker position. Maybe it's just that they really like what they have. I know from an outside perspective, that's not really a reassuring outlook, I guess, for fans, because Nathan Gary is the only guy that's really started, and even him, he's had some up and down moments. But again, I think when you look at what the Eagles have done in the past with Corey Nelson and LJ Fort, Jatavis Brown is kind of par for the course. He can play special teams. He's got experience at middle and weak side linebacker. I'll tell you this. I think they're going to draft a linebacker in the 3rd round at the latest. I think that this is going to be an opportunity for them to really address this position, because I do think this linebacker class is pretty good. So Jatavis Brown's a guy they can easily cut. He's also a guy that they can easily take advantage of his athleticism. He's going to be competition for Alex Singleton, for Duke Riley, and they'll go from there. But yeah, their linebacker group is an interesting group.
Yeah. So my opinion on Jatavis Brown is he's the threequel to Corey Nelson and LJ Fort, like a guy who wasn't really full-time on his previous team, had some previous full-time experience, and a lot of people on Eagles Twitter are pretending like they know who he is. So he kind of falls in that line. And he's the guy that they're basically taking a flyer on, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, they'll cut him before the end of the season, like the last two guys.
I'll be completely honest with you. I had no idea who he was. No, absolutely no idea. And honestly, he was in high school when I worked in West Palm Beach. So like the fact that like I didn't know who he was, he got a scholarship, and I still didn't know who he was. I mean, he went to the University of Akron. He set a bunch of records there. From what I understand, really good guy, really good special teams player. But like as far as defensive upside, I wouldn't get too excited about him. They also signed him for like pretty much nothing. So that's interesting. Let's move on to, like, in my opinion, what's going to be one of the more underrated signings that they've made in a very long time. Your guy.
My guy, Philly Will. Before we get into the football side, I think we talked about this a little on the last podcast, but if we did, I'm sorry I'm repeating myself. But I've said in the past, he's one of my favorite guys I've ever covered. He's just really fun-loving guy. I tweeted a video actually that it went viral when it happened, but it's kind of blown up since I tweeted it too. When he was at Arizona, there was a moment before a game. I can't remember who was it against, but like he was like walking away. He was at the coin toss and he was like walking away from the ref. The ref like tapped him on the shoulder and then was going to go announce what happened. And then Will Parks just went back and tapped the ref on the shoulder. And it's like this like subtle little. I don't know if you saw the video that I tweeted out. It's just like so funny. It just kind of exemplifies Will Parks pretty well. And yeah, he's just a guy. Like I tweeted this right away. Like the city of Philadelphia is going to really like him. I don't think he's like a Pro Bowler caliber player, but he's a smart signing. It sounded like he had interest from other teams and he wanted to come back to Philly. He's been in Denver the last few years. He had a pretty good college career. He's a hard hitter. He's pretty versatile. It's going to be fun seeing him fit into this. I think personality wise, I think he's going to get along really well with a guy like Jalen Mills and Rodney McLeod. Like I think he's really going to fit into that locker room too.
Well, actually, you want to hear something fun? His trainer in Philly, Brandon Bing, who used to play for the Giants, also works with Jalen Mills and Rodney McLeod. So there's a relationship there. On top of that, Sidney Jones trains with his trainer in Texas, Ronnie Braxton, who's developed guys like Aqib Talib and AJ Boye and Chris Harris. So like he's got connections already to the second day. It's pretty crazy, actually. And I think from a locker room perspective, I was talking to you about this earlier. I've talked to several people. I obviously don't have the background you have with him, but everyone I talk to raves about Will as a person. And I think that's the type of guy they want in the locker room.
Yeah, I just sent you the video. I want you to watch it because I want you to see how funny it is. But yeah, I just think, and even just in terms of like the Eagles' philosophy, like he's a young guy who can become a better player, and it's only a 1-year deal. So if he plays really well, they'll have to re-sign him and all that. But I think this is kind of falling in line with Howie's idea of getting younger.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is. Here's the thing that I would say too. Is when you look at the guys that they're bringing in, they're not paying them. I mean, well, I guess you got Javon Hargrave, but like Hargrave, Brown, and Parks are all guys who can be here for a long time if they take advantage of their opportunities. And I definitely think Hargrave will. I've been a fan of Hargrave since he was a prospect. But Parks, to me, with his versatility, I think he could beat out Jalen Mills for that strong safety job. And even if he doesn't, as the third safety, that's maybe one of the best opportunities to make plays on the ball that you can get, Yeah. So he's a guy that I think is very, very set up to succeed here. So is Hargrave. I think Jatavis Brown's set up to take advantage of an opportunity. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. None of these guys are being set up to fail. It felt like LJ Fort was a little bit set up to fail. It felt like some of these other guys that they brought in weren't necessary. Like Sendejo was set up to fail, whether we want to accept that or not. He wasn't very good, but he also probably was never put in the right position. I mean, he seemed like a half-season rental. So, I think this is an interesting offseason. And speaking of offseason and Will Parks, I brought up Sidney Jones, who's working with Ronnie Braxton. Sidney's a guy who has struggled with confidence. He struggled to stay healthy. He's going through Braxton's program, and Braxton calls himself a super trainer because what he does is he works on the mental side of the game. They do like 6 different workouts before like 3:00 in the afternoon. Like they're going to yoga, they're doing like health training, they're doing stuff with nutrition. Like he's teaching them everything. Aqib Talib, the first, I think, 5 years of his career was constantly injured. He went to Braxton, and since then, I think he made 5 straight Pro Bowls. So it's not for nothing. You can say he's just a trainer, but I think Sidney's taking the steps to better himself and taking the right steps to better himself. He's going to be around a bunch of Pro Bowl guys, maybe some potential Hall of Famers this offseason, and I think that'll make him a better player.
Well, we can stick at cornerback because the latest rumor, what shouldn't come as a surprise, and I think we both have thought this is probably going to happen, is that the Eagles are apparently shopping Rasul Douglas. Pro Football Talk reported it. I know you came up with a few trade ideas. I like them. I like the 49ers one in particular, but you want to go through them real quick?
Yeah. So the first one that I proposed was Royce Freeman for the Broncos. The Broncos. The Broncos just signed Melvin Gordon to a 2-year deal. Philip Lindsay wants an extension. He's coming off of, he was a Pro Bowler his first 2 seasons, and then he was a Pro Bowler his rookie season, kind of caught the league by storm, kind of dealt with injuries last year. But Freeman's a guy who has a couple of connections to the coaching staff. You look at Rich Gangrello, who was the Broncos offensive coordinator last year, is now the senior offensive assistant. He kind of expanded Royce Freeman's game a little bit. He caught over 45 passes, or over 40 passes last year, kind of developed into a better receiver. He's got kind of a ground and pound style similar to Jordan Howard. And then TJ Pagnetti, who's the assistant running game coach / running backs coach, was a graduate assistant / assistant linebackers coach at Oregon when Royce Freeman was there on offense. So he's got a background with him as well. I think it makes a lot of sense. Freeman would be, entering the 3rd season of his career. He'd still be on a cheap rookie contract. There's only so many carries to go around, and they're paying Melvin Gordon to be a 3-down back. Plus they have Philip Lindsay. So, the coaching staff wasn't there or when he was drafted. Vic Fangio came in last year, and it seems like they're trying to rework the offense. So he makes sense to me. They also need some cornerback help. They just lost Chris Harris. And they traded for AJ Boye, but outside of him, they don't really have another outside corner. So it makes sense to me. And then we move on. This is a little bit of a one-sided trade. Dante Pettis, who kind of dealt with some injuries and kind of, it seems like Kyle Shanahan said that he was in the doghouse at the combine. So that's kind of interesting. But, oh, wow. Some breaking news from a Philly guy. PJ Walker, who was a sensation in the XFL, just signed with the Carolina Panthers. Yep. That's pretty cool.
Good for him.
Yeah, so anyway, Pettis is a guy who seems to have fallen out of favor in San Francisco after just 2 years. He's a guy who has really good speed, runs pretty okay routes, just has a dynamic skill set. But if you don't understand the game or you're not working the way your coach wants you to, you can fall out of favor, and maybe he just needs a change of scenery. Philly, I believe, was interested in him during the draft process in 2018. Swap for swap. Douglas can be some depth at cornerback behind, Akilo Witherspoon and Richard Sherman. Again, it's a very one-sided trade, and I'm getting trashed by 49ers fans because of it. I also don't understand why the guy who's bothering me follows me, but whatever.
Well, Pettis barely played for them last year, so I think
he had like 11 or 12 catches. I don't think it's like that big.
And they're probably going to draft a wide receiver in the first round too. So
Yeah, that's what everybody keeps saying, but I think they really need to address safety. I think they need to address, there's guys that are getting older on that offensive line. But yeah, I mean, maybe that's what maybe they need to replace DeForest Buckner because they're also going to lose Sheldon Day too. So they could be looking at somebody like Javon Kinlaw. Anyway, and then my last one, Josh Reynolds from the Rams. He's a guy who's always kind of been their perennial fourth wide receiver for the last 3 years. He worked with new Eagles wide receivers coach Aaron Moorhead at Texas A&M, went on to become a fourth-round pick of the Rams. Played quite a bit when Brandon Cooks was dealing with injuries a couple of years ago. Cooper Kupp was out for a while. He also stepped up there. He can play in the slot. He can play outside, but he's basically a fourth guy. And, he's entering the last year of his rookie contract, as is Rasul Douglas. Seemed like a smart swap. The Rams really have no cornerback talent outside of Jalen Ramsey. Plus, they don't really have first-round picks for the next 2 years. I think their second-round pick's gone too. They have no draft inventory. Plus, their cap situation is kind of rough too. So I just figured, adding cornerback depth for a fourth wide receiver makes a little bit of sense.
I agree. I am interested to see if they do find much of a market for Rasul or not. That'll be interesting to find out. But I mean, I wouldn't see why not. He's an experienced kid. I think,
and he costs nothing. He costs nothing.
Yeah. So why not take, even if it's a late draft pick or something? So it seems like if that's all true, then it seems like they're pretty much choosing Sidney Jones over him to stick around, right?
Yeah, and which I kind of once Unlin left, I kind of figured that, because if they hadn't traded Sidney Jones to Detroit by then, or he wasn't part of the Darius Slay trade, I was really surprised. That's when I was like, oh, okay, so then that makes sense. That, Sidney's the guy that they're going to go with. Obviously, he was the guy that they thought of more highly in the draft. He's also the guy that kind of has the most upside. So, why not? He's healthy for once this offseason. He seems to be eating better. He's taking care of himself by going to this trainer. Things are looking up for him.
Good for Sidney. All right. Before we wrap up in a little bit, why don't we go through if there's any a few free agents you have on your mind that you think the Eagles could or should still pursue?
I've always been on the Tajay Sharp train. I think if you're going to wait this out, you might as well grab a guy who's got positional versatility, a guy who, can be dependable. Tajay Sharp kind of falls in line with like the Josh Reynolds type trade. Like, he's not a guy who's going to be more than probably your number 2 option, but at least he can be a number 2 option if you need be. He's a guy who's buried behind some talented guys, or guys that they've invested high picks in, like Corey Davis and AJ Brown were obviously ahead of him, as well as Adam Humphries, who they paid a lot of money to in Tennessee. And then you look at the Rams, and you've got Brandon Cooks and Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods ahead of him there, ahead of Reynolds there. So I think you need to be creative here. I know everybody wants Perryman. Perryman struggled with learning playbooks in the past. He struggled with route running. He doesn't, as fast as he is, he doesn't really get a lot of yards after the catch. Yeah, he can beat a guy down the field, but after that, he's definitely getting tackled. Robbie Anderson, to me, it seems like he overthought his market. I don't think teams want to pay a guy who runs 3 routes very, very well $10 million. He's very clearly not a number 1 wide receiver, especially when you compare him to like 5 or 6 of the top guys in this draft class, just their upside in general. You can argue, well, Robbie's done it at the NFL level. Well, really, he's had a 900-yard season. I mean, like, I never understood that, and I took a lot of criticism for that, and I'm not being like, I told you so, but like, I don't think he's a number 1 wide receiver. I don't think he's worth $10 million. I don't know if he's really the guy. I don't know if he's a locker room fit, because I'm not saying he's a bad teammate, but I don't know if he necessarily fits into what they're looking for from that perspective. I think he's better off signing with the Jets personally. If he takes a 1-year deal and has a 1,200-yard season with 9 touchdowns, he's going to get the money he wants.
It kind of feels like it's headed towards him just returning to the Jets on a 1-year prove-it deal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Totally
Um,
agree.
yeah, other than that, I mean, it feel like most of the other stuff they're probably going to draft. Like they're probably not going to sign another linebacker unless somebody they really like is just hanging around that they can get like a Zach Brown type who that didn't work out, but like somebody of that ilk who's like been productive. They're probably not going to sign a defensive end. I don't think. Don't think they'll sign any more safeties. Probably maybe a backup running back. I don't know if there's any guys that are that intriguing that are on the market right now. Unless they brought old Eagles legend Frank Gore back in the mix, I'd be up for that.
Oh man, that'd be something, huh?
Retire where it all started, really.
Here, wait. If you'll excuse me, I'll pull up the running back group and then we can go through it just really quickly.
Yeah.
I know we're kind of talking quite a bit, and I've been a little distracted. I feel like like the mini Ian Rappaport. I'm getting a ton of text messages during this thing. Like it's funny. Like you watch NFL Network and he's getting like blown up on his phone in the middle of stuff. Dion Lewis could be interesting. Chris Thompson could be interesting, but they're both 30.
Yeah.
The problem with this running back group is like they're all older. Peyton Barber could maybe be a guy.
That's kind of the one I had. And I mean, he's like not that good is the problem.
Right.
He's like a short yardage guy. They don't really have that right now, I guess.
Yeah, I mean CJ Precise maybe. I mean like
I guess if Isaiah Crowell is healthy, maybe I don't know.
I'm not touching that guy.
Spencer Ware,
David Fluellen. But
oh boy,
you know what legend is on the market though, right? And they've kept. You know what legend is on the market, right?
Wendell Smallwood.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
I actually do like DeAndre Washington as like a low cost guy.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good style fit too.
Yeah, and I mean I wouldn't be surprised if Corey Clement came back also.
If Devonta Freeman wanted a 1-year deal,
that'd be interesting.
I would do it, but I wouldn't do it for more than $3 million. My budget,
like maybe put like incentives for if he plays a lot or something.
Yeah, I'm giving Miles Sanders every available touch, and I also really do like Boston Scott quite a bit. But I think Boston Scott's a third running back. I think we need to like not overvalue everything that he did last year.
I wonder how high the Eagles will be willing to draft like a backup running back this year. Probably like 5th round, I would guess, right, or maybe 4th.
Yeah,
like it's really there.
I mean, I think they want to get young, but I also think they really need a guy who can do multiple things and can be that guy. The one guy I actually, prior to his re-signing, that I liked was from the Las Vegas Raiders, Jalen Richard. I thought he made a lot of sense for them.
Pass catcher with speed kind of thing.
Yeah, so, yep, that's kind of where I come from at running back.
All right. I guess any other free agency notes before we want to do one last segment that we're going to try doing for now. Any last free agency notes?
I would keep an eye on the wide receiver market. I don't think they want to spend from based on what I've heard. Is there a possibility of Perryman? Sure, but I don't see them spending more than $2 million on a wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, if they can get one of those guys for $2 million, then you could feel okay about it. But yeah, I mean, I mean, it's still early is the thing, and we have to learn our lesson with not overreacting too quick. But I am surprised they haven't signed like anybody at wide receiver, like even like a low end guy.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it feels like they would have by now. But again, it's early. So, I mean, knowing how we'll make a trade that we're all not paying attention for. But yeah, before we go, I thought since we're going to be recording these podcasts seemingly in quarantine for a while, it'd be fun if at the end of each episode we both just say what we're doing with our spare time, whether we're watching something that we really like or we watched a movie or listening to a podcast. I just think it'd be cool to share what we're going on, and we'd be happy to hear from everybody else what you guys are doing. But you go ahead first, Mike. What is something you've watched recently or you are watching or that you're hyped on right now?
Well, if you want to support a fellow Philly guy, Dave.
I knew you were going to go with that. I knew it.
Yeah, I think I've watched every single one of his 4 episodes like 7 times. It just like it scratches the workaholics itch. If you're between the ages of 26 and 36, it's like the perfect show for you. It's very relatable. It's very funny. And then another thing that I just actually discovered yesterday, Dark Side of the Ring. If you're a wrestling fan, they go through kind of like the Von Erichs, which is a little bit before my time, who have the family curse. Spoiler alert. The father, who was the main guy, he had 6 sons. 5 of them died before he passed away. I mean, they were like the biggest wrestling family in the world during the 80s. And they did something on Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth. Macho Man's was a very big influence on me as a creative person growing up, mainly because I used to say, "Oh yeah," all the time. I've actually never had a Slim Jim, by the way.
Really? Not even when you were a kid or anything?
No, just nothing. It didn't like. I don't really even.
It's never happened for you.
I just don't eat. I don't even eat deli meat, so I'm like a very weird guy.
You're a very weird Jew, is what you mean.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
I'm Jewish, by the way. I can say that.
He can say that. He wasn't at my bar mitzvah, but he was there in spirit.
We all are at each other's bar mitzvahs in spirit.
Basically, we all know each other.
Yeah, we all know each other.
You know what's funny? Like, you bring that up. You remember when we first started talking? We have a mutual, really close friend. It's crazy. Our friend Lance.
Yeah, in Arizona. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just like weird because we all basically knew each other. And then they just did one on. They're about to do one on Chris Benoit, which I think is a very interesting situation for the wrestling business. Obviously, he killed his wife and his son. At the time, he was considered maybe the best technical wrestler of all time. I was a huge fan of his. I actually still remember where I was when I found out. It was my 19th birthday. I was sitting in a hotel waiting to start summer semester for my freshman year. And it was just like this big thing. And people didn't know that it was a murder-suicide till like 2 days later. The WWE did this huge thing of like kind of memorializing him. And I remember like kind of getting teary-eyed. I'm an emotional guy, but like getting very teary-eyed about it as I was watching all these interviews about how upset everybody was because, he was a big deal. And then we found out about the murder-suicide, and it was like a huge thing that weighed over like maybe like the first 3 weeks of my freshman summer, because wrestling's a big deal in the Southeast. It's a big deal in Jacksonville. And so it was a topic of conversation for a really long time. And I watched the first part. It's on YouTube right now, but the second part is supposedly going to go really into like all the crime of it. And I just found that interesting. So what about you?
Those are good recs. So I'm a big like podcast listener. I don't even really listen to music all that much in my car anymore. But since I haven't really been driving anywhere, it's only when I walk my dog that I listen to podcasts. But one I've been listening to a lot and just catching up on the last few days is called Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. It's Conan O'Brien, who I'm sure you all know. He has a podcast where the idea is basically like when he's interviewing people on the show, he doesn't actually get to know them, even if he like gets along with them pretty well, and then they never talk to each other again. So he thought this is a way for him to like get to know these people. So he has comedians, famous people. He had like Charles Barkley on a recent one. There was a Will Arnett one recently. He had a quarantine podcast with Andy Daly, who's a like great like character sketch comedian. It's just like a really funny, light thing to listen to if you like podcasts. And on Netflix, I watched this movie called Train to Busan. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. It's a South Korean zombie movie that takes place on a train, and it's one of the most well done zombie movies I've ever seen. The main kid from Parasite is in it. It does like a really good job of like character building and like world building, and it's just like it was just so entertaining and really good, and I highly recommend that. And I've been rewatching Parks and Recreation, and that show never gets old.
All right. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm just saying it's just easy. Sit down and turn off your mind and watch Parks and Rec kind of situation.
You're a big rewatcher. I'm not.
Oh yeah.
Give the audience two movies that if they've already seen it, it's worth rewatching. Like what movies have you rewatched over the last week or two?
Well, I watched Avengers Endgame again.
Yeah, but that doesn't count. Everybody watches that over and over again.
Not in the last week, but I very recently rewatched Forgetting Sarah Marshall, and I really love that movie. What's another one I rewatched recently?
While you're thinking about it, I'll give you the three that I've rewatched this week. Van Wilder, which wow. I don't know why we appreciate that movie as much as like our generation appreciates that movie way too much. It's not good. Like Ryan Reynolds is great, but like everything else about that movie is absolutely horrifically bad and not funny. It does not hold up well. I rewatched Sunset Boulevard. I'm like an old Hollywood guy. I love watching old movies. And so I recently rewatched that, and it's just like kind of incredible the technical advances that they kind of like fudged through. Like there's some like the way they edit and the way they do cutscenes and the way Hollywood is treated, it just kind of feels like you're in a completely new world. Just back then, it's post World War II. It's talking about the silent era, and Hollywood likes making movies about Hollywood, but this feels like a Hollywood movie that's not like a love letter to Hollywood. It's kind of about the dark side of Hollywood. I always found that very intriguing. I was a fan when they adapted it into a musical. My parents wouldn't let me go because they curse a lot and whatever. Glenn Close played Norma Desmond in it, and she was incredible. We used to listen to it in the car. Anyway. And then the other movie that I just rewatched, and I didn't realize... I loved it when I first saw it. On second viewing, I didn't think it was as good, and I'm sure I'll get blown up for this. I watched Black Panther, and I really loved it.
Good.
It's good, but the second time I watched it, I was like, wow, they could have done so much more. And maybe it's just after seeing Endgame, nothing's going to be the same ever again. But, like, I thought that there was so much more to do with Michael B. Jordan. I thought Michael B. Jordan crushed every scene that he was in. And I guess you don't want to put too much heat on the villain because then the main character becomes kind of like distant, kind of like if you watch the old Batman, not the old Batman movies, but like the Tim Burton Batman movies were all about the villain to the point where Michael Keaton was a supporting character. And I think that's something that Christopher Nolan did very, very well with not making him a supporting character. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. Like Michael B. Jordan is a guy that I cannot stop watching. I think that guy is an incredible actor. If there was going to be like a what's his name? If they're doing a Green Lantern and they're going to do a Jonathan Stewart, Michael B. Jordan would be my choice. A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Like I love watching that guy act. I think he's phenomenal. So yeah, I'll put that out there. Oh, another controversial thing that I want to bring up: $20 to see movies that are in theaters. I understand the thought process of trying to make up the budget for theaters. I understand the thought process of thinking that there'll be more than one person in a room. But you and I are very big movie buffs. I go to the movie theater to escape and to have an experience there. Renting a movie for $20 on my TV is not going to do it for me. What's your take?
I actually understand the $20 just because you're paying for something that wouldn't be available otherwise or whatever. I mean, but the only movies that are available right now aren't really that inspiring. Is I think the main like if Black Widow was there, it'd be different than if whatever the Hunt or whatever is
right. An event movie. An event movie makes sense. Like if Star Wars, like I could understand if Star Wars came out 2 weeks ago and then they were putting it on there, and I'd be like, yeah, hell yeah, take my money, even though it's terrible. I was
going to say. I mean, that's a terrible waste of money, actually.
But I'm just saying, like an event movie.
I get your point. All right. I think that's enough pop culture talk for now. I hope if you guys like us talking about that stuff, let us know. We'll keep doing it. I think Mike and I both like talking about movies, so we'll keep filling you guys in on what we're doing. If the Eagles make any other moves, we'll be back with another free agency pod. Otherwise, we'll check back in with you guys probably next week. Thanks for listening, and make sure you write some reviews, leave some comments.